Welcome to the Chicago Mayoral Election 2019, the live results, live stream broadcast. My name is Jenniffer Weigel, joined by my colleague Bob Herguth. Bob, what a day already.
Oh, big time. Sun-Times front page today, 14.
14.
Final 14.
That's right, 10 men, 4 women. An unusually low turnout, apparently, reporting that the polls are not exactly packed today.
Yeah, we still have another hour before the polls close at 7 p.m., but the last word is that the numbers are down and right now projected around maybe 30% in terms of turnout.
Okay, let's talk about what might happen with the mail-in candidates, because basically, or rather the mail-in ballots, over 60,000, I believe, is the number that have to be counted if they are mailed by today, and they will be counted by, is it March 13th? So that could really impact this election if we don't have one candidate that gets more than 50% of the vote.
Right, before March 13th. I mean, the way voting used to go is you go into your polling place and cast a ballot, and nowadays you can early vote, you can request a mail-in ballot and vote through the mail or drop it off. And there have been over 60,000 mail-in requests. And as of last night, at least, only about half of those have been counted. So if this is a tight race, which it, by most appearances it probably will be, the mail-in ballots could really be crucial, and they're not all going to be counted right away, presumably. So yeah, this could be a very, could be a long night. We might not have any, we might not very well know who's going to be in the runoff.
And the runoff would be in early April.
April 2nd, and the way the runoff works here is that the election today, if no candidate, and again, not just for mayor, but also for alderman or the other citywide offices of city clerk and city treasurer, don't get more than 50% of the vote, then the top 2 vote getters will face off April 2nd.
April 2nd, top 2 vote getters. And let's talk about how we got here. This all took place because Rahm did not run again. We had 8 years with Rahm, and now we will not have 4 more. So this is happening, and there were originally 20 candidates, 20.
More than 20, yeah.
More than 20. Okay, so we've thinned down to 14, and this is happening, and it's a really unusual circumstance, this many candidates.
Yeah, I mean, this is, from what we understand, this is the largest field of candidates ever in Chicago municipal election history. 14, it started out with over 20. Some of those that have fallen by the wayside include Dorothy Brown, the circuit court clerk. So she's no longer on in the race. But 14 is a big number, and that's part of what's going on here is that there are so many candidates, and the polls, at least at least many of the polls show that a number of those candidates are within kind of striking distance of each other. So it could be a very tight race, and it could be a long night. And by the end of the night, like we said, we may or may not, know who's going to be in the runoff, presuming there is one, which we are presuming there will be.
Now, the runoff, of course, this has happened before. We're talking about with Rahm and Chewy. So with that, Chewy's been in force in this election as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, Chuy Garcia, now congressman, last election, a mayoral candidate who forced Rahm Emanuel into a runoff, and then Rahm Emanuel obviously won. And Chewy, though, not running this time and not taking sides in the mayoral race, at least publicly, but has backed a number of candidates. So he's sort of a quiet force, or not so quiet force in this race as well on the Aldermanic front. Because again, we have 50 aldermen that make up the city council, which is the legislative branch of city government. And Chewy is backing some, including a candidate in the 14th ward, where Alderman Ed Burke is fighting for his political life, and elsewhere.
Exactly, he is fighting for his political life. We have a lot of people coming in tonight. We've got our reporters who are out in the field. They're going to be reporting to us, coming in and talking with us. We have a couple of candidates who are going to be joining us. We have Paul Vallis actually in the studio cheering behind right now. And so as we go through this evening, Bob, and the results start to come in, like you said, we aren't going to have answers, but we are going to have a lot of conversations because with all of the facts that come in, with all of the opinions, it's important to note that because the Sun-Times did have the editorial board back, Lori Lightfoot, this just came, this was February 8th after the editorial board town halls, which we had 2 of. There was a morning session and an afternoon session, and the decision on who was in each session was literally just names drawn from a bowl to decide who was going to be in which panel. And we have some clips that we're going to be running for you throughout the evening of some of those descriptions on some of those platforms. And so let's go ahead and bring Paul Vallis over here because we know that Paul would like to come on over. Paul, join us.
Welcome.
Welcome to the program.
Oh, I thought I was going to sit on the crate.
Yeah, no, you don't have to sit in the crate.
I'm
You
still
can
trying to
sit.
figure out how those papers stay up there.
We
Are they
recycle.
nailed? All right.
But
Let's
yes.
turn that over.
Yeah, let's turn that over. But
No,
just
I'm joking.
because the editorial board, when they endorse somebody, it does not affect how the reporters report something. So let's talk, we want to be sure to make that very clear, that an editorial board endorsement does not mean that the Sun-Times coverage is only going to be about Lori Lightfoot.
Yeah, it's a really important point. I mean, the way a newspaper works, a lot of the public may or may not know this, the news staff reports things objectively, fairly, and without bias. The editorial board takes an editorial position, an opinion on an issue or a candidate. In this case, the Sun-Times endorsed Lori Lightfoot.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Hi there, Paul.
Hi, how are you?
How's your day been?
It's been good.
Has it?
Yeah, I was heading the train stops and the L stops in the morning, and I spent time, of course, the last day of campaigning would not be the same if you don't go to the Billy Goat. And then, of course, I went to the Roseland Pullman community where I grew up.
Sure.
Was born and raised, and then spent time in Englewood. So I've ended the campaign where I started, visiting the communities.
And you started the campaign also right while Rahm was still, before he had announced that he was not going to run. I mean, how has his decision not to run impacted your the way you've run?
You know, it hasn't impacted the way I've run at all, because my approach from the beginning was to really run an issue-oriented campaign. I think no one out there has said that I haven't been very substantive on the issues, and to offer very specifics about how to balance budget, how to cap property taxes, how to address the issue of public safety, you know, how to revitalize the schools, how to get lead out of the drinking water. So my approach from the beginning was to really, address the issues and address them square on with the type of detail that would hopefully provide some guidance on what the city can do to get out of the financial mess, the public safety mess, the economic development mess. You know, I saw this stunning statistic the other day. WBEZ did a study that basically said that in 1970, 50% of the city's population was middle income. Today it's 16%. And in 1970, 42% of the city's population was considered low income. Today it's 62%. And the life and the differences in life expectancy, depending on where you live in Chicago, is as much as 15 years. So clearly, there are issues that need to be addressed in this city. And obviously, I've run an issue-oriented campaign, and a campaign that has been community-based. In other words, immersing myself in the community. I don't think I've taken a day off since April.
But there are, rightly put, there are a lot of really important issues and a lot of important problems out there. So why aren't people voting today as much? At least apparently as of now, fairly low numbers, maybe even record low numbers.
You know, I don't know. Look, there's no secret that, the reason we have this election in February is to minimize voter turnout. The reason we picked the worst month of the year to have the election is to minimize voter turnout. The reason we make the reason we require so many signatures on petitions, and then we have to go through this convoluted process. It's preventative. Yeah. I mean, Vladimir Putin could take some lessons from Chicago on how to deny people political participation. Right. And look, to a certain extent, and I'm not criticizing the media because you're absolutely right. Your reporters have been absolutely splendid, great to work with. Many I've worked with for years. But the bottom line is, you start handicapping races based on who can raise enough money. And after a while, people, you almost create this expectation of results. So-and-so has raised so much money. When you ask me, the difference, what has changed since Rahm dropped out, instead of running against Rahm, I'm running against 4 Rahms. I'm running against the Burke 4. I'm running against, individuals who are part of the money class, who have raised millions of dollars and have had millions of dollars of campaign ads on TV, yet they haven't really moved at all. In fact, one can argue that Preckwinkle has actually lost percentage points. Daley, with the Daley name, has spent probably, $3-4 million on TV, and what has he moved? 1 or 2 points. Same thing with Chico and Mendoza. So
I think the money is an important point, though, because Daley's budget has been in the $8.7 million range for this campaign.
A lot of money.
And a lot more money, and here you are in the much lower tier, right? I believe it was whatever it was published, it was under 2.
I put my commercial on social media, and I got 340,000 hits, and that was the first hit. That's, so I've run a very aggressive social media campaign.
Let's talk about that. Your social media presence has been more aggressive. You have more international experience than a lot of the other candidates. So do you think you're going to make an impact with the millennials? That's really your hope, right?
Look, I have campaigned everywhere. Some people were asking me, why am I spending so much time on the south side and west sides? arguing that, with the candidates who are in the race, you're not going to get support there. I said, yes, I am. I mean, I haven't targeted a specific demographic. I've reached out to everybody, and I've done it by addressing the issues that impact everyone. And so at the end of the day, I've gone everywhere. Look, I've participated in 50 community forums. I've seen Daley at maybe 6 or 7. I mean, at the end of the day, had he not ducked the Fox Forum, I would have, I always wanted to replace it daily. I had an opportunity to do it at the Fox debate. So look, I'm very confident that I'm going to finish in a runoff. We've done our own tracking, we've done our own polling, and the results I'm getting are very positive. And, so I...
From today, you mean, or in the
past?
Yes,
well,
today, like
we've been doing
polling?
We've been doing it. No, I'm not talking about exit polling. When we track and we communicate, we basically ask for response. We did a poll that surveyed 1,000 people, and our results tell us that we're neck and neck with Preckwinkle and Daley. So I'm very confident that when voters go to the polls, they're going to ask themselves, who has the skills to get the city on the right track, and who has demonstrated, based on their past performance, that they have the abilities to do it, and they have the abilities to do it in a way that's going to benefit the entire city.
You talked about the polls. Some of the results were coming in that the majority of the people at the polls are over the age of 55 to 64, and AARP, we're very grateful for their support. This is happening because of their support and their focus and being able to have this event. But that elderly, I'm 55, it's very cold. You look good.
No,
but the
I've had a runny nose all day. I'm like a child with a runny nose all day today.
You're working hard. But 55 and older, 55 to 85, those are the people that are hitting the polls, not the younger.
I think that's going to help me because, they remember that I built 78 schools and renovated 350.
Right.
That we had 70,000 more kids in the schools. When I was, that's why Deborah Lynch, the head of the teachers union, when I was in the Chicago Public Schools, has been a rabid supporter of mine from the beginning. They remember when I balanced the budget and froze property taxes and had a record number of police officers on the street. They remember the years when there were no scandals, were no controversy. Schools were opening on time. We had labor peace. I think that's going to help me. I think that's going to help me.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry.
You mentioned, you're running against Daley among others, and you worked for Richard M. Daley when he was mayor, and a lot of these issues at the core of what's going on here and the problems of this city have been exacerbated by that regime or were created by that regime. And are there any regrets you have when you were working for Mayor Daley that, or things you would have done differently or could have done differently?
No, not really. Look, I came in, first of all, I got my start working for Senator Dawn Clark-Netsch in Springfield for 12 years. And then, so I was recruited to take over the scandal-ridden revenue department, which I did for 3 years. And I cleaned up that department, and I took over the budget for 3 years when the city was in financial distress. I balanced 3 budgets, fully funded the pension systems, put a record number of police officers on the street, that resurfaced 70% of the city streets without raising property taxes and without borrowing. And then, of course, I went on to Chicago Public Schools. And, I inherited a school district that had a $1.2 billion 6-year structural deficit, and I left the district with $1 billion in cash balances, 12 bond rating upgrades, and, in effect, 78 new schools and 350 renovated schools, and we had 70,000 more students, and we were mentioned in 2 presidential addresses as models for the nation. Of course, then I went on to have similar success in Philadelphia, and I rebuilt the entire school system in New Orleans. So, do I have regrets? I like to think that that I'm clearly smarter than I was there. I mean, the experience of now doing multiple crises in different states, not to mention the work I've done rebuilding school systems in Haiti and Chile after the earthquakes, have better prepared me for the task at hand. But I believe that both the city and the schools were moving in the right direction, and obviously, hopefully that sense will resonate with the majority of voters, and that will help propel me at least to the runoff.
You've talked about how we can help staff first responders and police and fire, and with the help of your ROTC schools. Can you expand on that a little bit?
There's no reason why the next generation of police officers, firefighters, EMTs, first responders, there's going to be estimates as many as 1 million or to 2 million drone pilots, drone operators, that growing industry. There's no reason why the city's military academies and ROTC programs can't be a pipeline for that next generation. You know, what people don't realize is that there are 10,000 students in our LTC programs. Obviously, I opened the nation's first military high schools, and 90% of those children are Black and Latino. So the bottom line here is there are great opportunities for us to create a pipeline so that the next generation, just not public schools, parochial and private schools too, the next generation of cops, firefighters, EMTs can all come from the community, and that would have a transformational effect on the police. But I've also talked about how we could fill our vacancies and restore beat integrity so that every neighborhood has police officers dedicated who are known to the community and are in turn know the community, but also how we really need, because our detectives division has just now been rebuilt or restaffed. I mean, they allowed the number of detectives to attrit out close to 400, which is one of the reasons that the clearance rate on murders dropped to below 20%. But I've talked about how we could do what other cities have done, and to bring back 400, 500 retired police officers with extensive investigatory experience, to put them on these cases so that we could quickly make progress in increasing the clearance rates and getting these killers off the street. So there are solutions, and I'm proud to say we've offered solutions on so many things. Look, you know, I'm going to win, and I'm very confident that I'm going to win, but I have no regrets, because I believe that the issues that I've addressed and the recommendations and the proposals that I've laid out, and they just haven't been organic to me, they've been in part a product of me talking to everybody on the planet. I think we're offering some real substantive solutions to the complex problems that the city experiences. So I really feel that this campaign has been the type of campaign I wanted to run, a campaign about solutions. And I think we all benefit when we have a real dialogue about how we're going to solve the city's problems.
There's been some star power here in this election. Amara Enya, for instance, with Chancellor Rapper and Kanye West throwing their support behind her. You've had Sean Penn, right? Who right back to you or donated some money to you. Was there anything beyond just him throwing you a few bucks and a few kind words, or have you guys consulted about anything?
No, not really. Well, you know, let me tell you, first of all, I think Sean made a small campaign contribution. I would have liked to have made a much larger contribution. I would have settled for 1/4 of what Amara got from Chance the Rapper or Kanye. But let me point out, not to take anything away from those endorsements to her, but my relationship with Sean Penn was a product of my work in Haiti, because, when I was rebuilding schools in New Orleans, I was asked to go to Haiti after the devastating earthquake that killed about 250,000 people to work with the international community to develop a plan to build a functioning school system. And Sean Penn had gone down there after the earthquake, and he set up an NGO, non-governmental organization, that for 4 years took care of 60,000 displaced Haitians, who literally lived in tent cities for 4 years. And